And so the theme we've been having for the last few months is called the Six Perfections. So from those of you who know about Buddhism will know that there is this idea of what kind of a person would you be if you were trying to be an ideal Buddhist, and that is known as a Bodhisattva, which means a Bodhi being, an awakening being. But it's particularly associated with following an altruistic path. So it's a path, a spiritual path, which is not just to do with your own welfare, not just to do with sorting yourself out or coping better with life or even becoming a wonderful person, but more as well to do with feeling that your awakening is intimately involved with that of everybody else, and that we have a huge effect on others, and that if we care about ourselves, we also need to care about others, and that this is really important. And I'm sure everyone who's got any contact with Buddhism will know about that compassion, that metta or love aspect of Buddhism. And so the Bodhisattva ideal became a path. And in that path, at least in the earlier versions of it, there were six perfections, six completenesses, six things to work on in your life. And that's what we've been looking at. So we've been looking at, first of all, the perfection of giving, which is the beginning, because it's to do with, can I soften my own boundaries a little bit? Can I sort of just take the risk of reaching out and being involved with others and feeling that in a way we're all in this together, that others really make a difference, and I'd like to go out to others. So that's giving. Then the second one is the perfection of ethics, which is trying to make sure, looking at the impact you have on yourself and your surroundings and the world, and seeing whether you can make sure that's a benevolent, a beneficent impact. And that's involved with the precepts in Buddhism and so on. And then we had a look at the perfection of patience or forbearance, which is how do you cope with all the stuff that life throws at you and remain in a reasonably okay state of mind? Big challenge, that one. How do you do that? And you can imagine that a lot of Buddhist practice is to do with that. And then the fourth one is energy, enthusiasm, engagement, real involvement. And so we looked at that. How is it that you can make contact with your own sources of energy? How can you deal with that? How can you apply your energy in ways that don't cause too many bruises on others, but actually make a positive difference? And then we looked at the perfection of meditation or samadhi or dhyana. And in that perfection, we're looking at how you unify your mind. And then lastly, the sixth one that we've reached now is the perfection of wisdom, which is called perfection supreme. So it's the most perfect of all the perfections, is the perfection of wisdom. We had a great talk on that from Arijit a few weeks ago. And since then, we've been looking at different angles on it. So that's where we're at. We've reached the last perfection, really exciting. And we've reached the last week on the last perfection. And next week, just to fill you in, next week we're going to have 3 of our regular participants, 3 of the mitras who support this class and are involved here, are going to talk about their own practice. So we'll get something a little bit more personal and immediate, and I'm really looking forward to that next week, to hear from those 3 people. I think Nisha, who's here, is one of them. Edan, who's usually here, is another one. And who's the third? And Jenny, who's online, is the other one. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, so you probably, if you've been coming for a while, you'll know all 3. So that's nice to hear a little bit more about their own practice. So I've got a handout, but I won't give it to you just now because I know what it's like. It's very tempting to sort of divide your attention between listening and reading the handout. So what I'm going to say now is on the handout, most of it. And what I wanted to look at was the traditional way of cultivating wisdom, using what are called sometimes the 3 wisdoms, or the 3 types of wisdom, or even the 3 stages of wisdom. Sometimes they're seen as progressive. So I don't know whether anyone's heard of this, but it goes back to very early Buddhism. How is it? Because it's all very well saying, oh yeah, be wise, be a wise person. And you might say, well, let's just hope that in meditation the wisdom arises. Or let's think, oh, maybe if I study loads and loads and I learn loads of things. Buddhism is full of things to study and learn, full of lists and very deep philosophies. psychological analysis of the human mind. Maybe if I learn all that, I'll be a wise person. How do I do it? How do I become wise? And so I find this really interesting. And the three wisdoms is a really nice way of looking at it, in my view. So the three wisdoms are called the wisdom of hearing or paying attention, the wisdom of reflecting or making it your own, and the wisdom of meditating or of complete transformation. So that you can see why they are potentially three levels, but there are also three approaches as well, and you can go into each approach separately if you want to. So the wisdom of hearing, at first sight you might say, oh yeah, that's just hearing about the six perfections of the Bodhisattva and understanding it and so on. And there is, to some extent, that's there, that the wisdom of hearing may just be, getting at least an intellectual sense of how does this work? Does it make sense? Can I understand it? Can I fit it together? Can I remember it even? But it's more than that, because it's also the wisdom of mindfulness in a way. It's the wisdom of paying attention to your own experience and taking it seriously and saying that the basis for my own wisdom, the basis for my own depth of awareness of what's really going on must be based not on what other people tell me, not on some kind of faith or belief, not on some kind of systematic study or evidence from outside, but it needs in the end to be based on my real experience. What is really going on for me? And I find this really interesting. And it's quite a big deal, actually, to take our own experience seriously. So I'm going to say a little bit about this, and then we can split into smaller groups, and online we'll go into breakout rooms, and I'll give you the handouts, and you can talk a little bit about it from your own point of view. So you could even start thinking about that now. Do I already have some realizations? Are there some things I already know? Not just because I've learned them and I listened to a documentary or a podcast on it, but I know this really from my own experience. The example I usually give here is when I first started meditating. I did suffer sometimes from depressive episodes. I feel a bit low, and then I just had this, as I was meditating, I thought, oh, that does happen, doesn't it? Yeah. But it never lasts. It always changes into something different. And it was a little minor thing in a way, but it was based on real experience. And I thought, yeah, that's true. And it didn't stop it happening. It wasn't that it was a sudden miraculous cure or something for depressive episodes, although I don't get them now, I should say, but this is a long time ago. But it did take the sting out of it, because whenever it happened, I would it went deep enough, that realization, so I could tell myself, I'm not very happy at the moment, am I? But I know it's going to change into something different. And of course, it might get worse, but it will be different at least. And I think one of the things about low mood is that we convince ourselves that this is the real thing. Everybody's horrible and my life is not going well and everything's always going wrong, or always. We convince ourselves that it's a static, problematic state. But actually, if we are more open to our memory of our life and to what's actually even going on in the instant, we'll realize that everything is changing. And that sense that things are changeable, and that's where the opportunities arise. There is danger there as well. Things can go wrong, we can lose things, and we need to face that. But there's also opportunities in those changes that are always arising. So that was just an example. So you might want to think about that. You may have had realizations as well. You may have understandings of your own psychology, for example. You may, well, I've got this particular tendency. I'm a very gregarious person, and that sometimes gets me into trouble. Or I'm a very private person, and I need a lot of time by myself. So you might have those personal realizations about, just to take seriously yourself. Well, I have these needs, don't I? I do have a genuine need. I have a need for love. I have a need for recognition. I have a need for other people to acknowledge me as a real person, and I can't demand it, but at least I can try and set up circumstances where I have people around me who can provide me with that need. So you can realize what your genuine needs are, which is really fantastic when you can do that. You might have realizations about other people as well. You might start to understand a human nature a bit, and be a bit more forgiving and realize, well, everybody's flawed. This person has just put their foot in it. They said something really insensitive. I was really annoyed and upset, but I know that's not the whole of them, and I know that I can't expect people to be perfect. I can maybe do something about it, and if it's very serious, I can take it further, but I'm not going to expect people to be perfect, because I know that I'm not. And I'm also not going to focus in just on their imperfections. I'm going to try and take a bigger view of people. And so that could be another kind of realization, your understanding of other people. Your realizations could even be more sort of mystical. They could be sense of interconnectedness, how the whole of humanity or even the whole of life is interconnected and in a sense is one. And you might have those really deep senses of that. It might happen, in a dream. It might happen, when you've just had a really strong experience of some kind, like bereavement. You might have this sense of connection, or even a sense of tragedy, a sense of the real predicament that people are in. I'm not the only one in it. Maybe when you hear of awful things happening around the world, we had a murder very close to here only yesterday, which probably some people have heard about. And, that could, obviously that's an awful thing, but it's also something, okay, we are living in a really imperfect world, and I don't want to put up with that. I want to try and do something. Is there anything I can do about it? Is there anything I can do to have a better connection with my neighbours or my neighbours' children? It might do something very small, but it might make it a little bit less likely that a stabbing like that happens, So I'm sure you can think of lots of examples, but I think it's just worth reflecting on that. And it might be the mystical experience might happen in meditation. It might even happen through drug use. There's all sorts of sources it can happen through. It might happen because you had a bang on the head. Who knows? Or just because you go to a really exotic place, like in the Himalayas, and you see the vast scale of the mountains, and you almost have a feeling of the gods of the place, and you feel that the world is a living organism. It's not just dead things, but it's filled with magic and life and so on. So you see what I mean? These may be genuine experiences you have. They're not things that other people have given you or taught you. You might make sense of them within these different frameworks. So for example, mystical experiences, a Christian might make sense of them in terms of, Jesus spoke to me, or I had a vision of God or something. A Buddhist might see it more in terms of, the Buddha within, the possibility of awakening that everybody has. But those are, in a way, frameworks that we maybe help us to make sense of these experiences. But what really matters is to take the experience itself seriously. The framework may be helpful, I'm not saying it's not, but it's the actual insight, the small I that we have, that is important, I think. So I've said quite a lot about that first level of wisdom, which is known as the wisdom of hearing, the wisdom of paying attention, maybe paying attention to these useful frameworks for experience, but particularly paying attention to your genuine own experience. So take it seriously. Don't forget it. If you have something like this happening, maybe write it down or draw a picture or write to somebody else about it, so that you don't lose it, because it may feel like something so strong that, of course, I'll never forget that thing about depression, but maybe I will, actually. I don't know if this happened to you, but you might have had something really important to you, and then you start making, you realize, I've got an addictive personality, I must be really careful around certain things. And then maybe a year later, you forget that, and you succumb once again. So you need to remember the realizations that you've got. Take them seriously, remember them, reflect on them, which is the next level of wisdom, and if you can, act from them. So, well, does this have an implication? Now that I've noticed this, does it have an implication for my life? Maybe if you have a profound experience in meditation, the implication might be, I really need to make sure meditation is a regular part of my life. It could be something like that. It could be, well, I'm really affected by the people around me. I need more love and support around me. So let me change my circumstances, even if it means going to a less well-paid job in a smaller place or something. I don't know what it might be, but something like that. So I'll speak a bit more briefly about the other two kinds of wisdom. So we've got the wisdom of reflecting. And so this is when you've realized something but you now need to fully integrate it. You need to bring it home fully in some way. You need to sort of make it your own. So it might be an example might be, I might hear somebody say, all things are impermanent, which is a basic Buddhist teaching, but I haven't yet connected that with my own depressive tendency. So that would be the reflection would be hearing that and thinking, oh yeah, fair enough, that seems true. But then I think, oh, but that implies something about my experience, doesn't it? If it's really true that everything's impermanent, I need to realize that everything is flowing, everything is flux. And those things that I assume are very solid and definite, I'll always be this kind of person. I'll always have a bad temper. You like it or not, there you go. You've got to put up with it. And maybe, no, actually everything's impermanent. Things can change. So that's the wisdom of reflecting, is when you start to make it really relevant to you, whatever it is. And then the third kind of wisdom, the wisdom of meditating. I apologize in advance. I'm going to give you a Sanskrit for it. Bhavana mai prajna. Prajna is the word for wisdom. And bhavana is the word usually used for meditation, but it literally means bringing into being. So you may have, probably most of you have learnt the loving kindness meditation, and you want to remember what that is called? Metta bhavana, same word. So it's the word for meditation, but also the word for bringing something into being. So you're bringing metta, loving kindness, into being. And so this is the wisdom of bringing something into being. And the something you're bringing into being, in a way, is a new you. It's a you where the wisdom has gone so deep that you will never lose it. It's now a part of you. And so in that sense, it's the deepest kind of wisdom. It's a bit mysterious, and it's not something you can just make happen. But maybe it's relevant that it says the wisdom of meditating, because meditating is one of the ways you can make it go really deeply and really stick. And so you may sometimes do insight styles of meditation, which is a style of meditation where you're not just, say, using the breath to concentrate or trying to cultivate kindness and love, but you're also going a bit further. You're noticing the flow of the breath and the interconnectivity that breath represents. And so therefore you're developing wisdom, or you're realizing that love is something universal and it connects us with all living creatures completely, and that we all matter as much as each other. So that might be an insight you develop through the metta bhavana. So sometimes in your meditation, you can bring in an insight element. On the handout, I put some other things. I put, there's impermanence. There's also the other two of the marks of conditioned existence, as they're called, which is the mark of unsatisfactoriness, realizing that there's nothing external that will solve all our problems of difficulty. We need to do that internally through our own working on ourselves. And the other one is non-self, is realizing that we are not a fixed, independent, separate soul in here somewhere. Everything about us is influenced by everything else. So that's on there. I think there's something else on there as well, which may or may not be interesting. Yeah, there's a little bit more on there also about how you can apply those three things in different areas of life. And there's also something from the Diamond Sutra, and I'll finish by reading that out. So it's trying to suggest how you actually look at your experience, how you look at your experience as being so jewel-like, so beautiful, so changeable, so flowing, something which if you grab it and attach to it, it'll bring you suffering. You need to allow it to blossom fully. So this is what it says in the Diamond Sutra, in the translation. As stars, a fault of vision, as a lamp, as a mock show, dewdrops or a bubble, as a dream, a lightning flash or cloud, so should one view what is conditioned.